Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Kizzy and I'm going to be doing my March wrap up today. So I did okay. My TBR for I think the month was like 9 books long. So it was pretty long and I read 6 books in total. 2 books weren't on that TBR, so I just kind of felt like reading them throughout the month, so I threw them in. So the books that I didn't get to were The Lies of Locke Lamore, Master and Margarita, and then a couple of like continuations of series that I'd planned to read like the whole series of the month, and I only read the first book in the series, that kind of thing. The first book I read was actually a bit of a disappointing book, and I ended up kind of going into a little bit of a reading slump throughout like the middle of the month because I just didn't feel it. It wasn't for me. It was a bit of a disappointment because it was a continuation of a series, and even though I liked the first book, I wasn't in love with it. The ending really kind of drew me in, so I was hoping that the next book would be as good as the ending of that book. But actually I ended up giving it 2 stars, and that is the Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. So it's the second book in the Bone Season quartet so far. I think it's going to be like a 7-book series though in the end. There's my foilty card. So this is a book, it's kind of hard to describe because this takes place in a completely different place than the first book in the series. The first book in the series begins in London, which is where this one is set, and we follow this girl called Paige who is part of the underground clairvoyant, sorry if you can hear the dishes in the background, I tried to wait till they were finished but it keeps going. So the underground clairvoyant London world, where there's different kind of factions of clairvoyancy. There's people that can see them, that can't see them, and they're all underground because they've been hunted and, like, I don't know, put in prison and killed, I think, is the main reason that way that they're punished. But then she ends up being kind of kidnapped and end up taken to this like unknown, thought it was destroyed city of Oxford, and discovers that actually the ruling species of the world are these kind of extraterrestrial, kind of from a different dimension, spiritual people called Raphians, that are these, they look like humans but their blood I think is like purple, something like that, I can't remember, and they're like really strong and they have powers. I found it quite confusing the first book anyway, and in this book it felt like the big climatic ending of this book should have been in the middle of the book, because the way it took to develop to the ending was just so like slow and repetitive. Just the same event kept happening kind of again, like that was meant to be like the tension side of it, and I just didn't really enjoy it. I think I'm not the biggest fan of like supernatural clairvoyancy anyway. Like when I read that kind of thing, it just doesn't seem to spark my interest as much. Like Ninth House by Leah Bardugo, I wasn't the biggest fan of that just because I think the topic generally doesn't interest me, and urban fantasy as well is one that takes me a while to kind of get into just because it doesn't seem very realistic to me, even though it's totally not real. Fantasy is not realistic as a genre, but if it's in another world and that is then normal, then that makes sense to me in my head for some reason. Yeah, this was just so repetitive and a little bit boring. This takes place back in London, and there were a few exciting moments. I was hoping the romance would be a bigger part of it, and that was kind of what was interesting me most, but it wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the continuation of the series. I have bought the rest of the series because I thought I would like it, which was a mistake. I shouldn't do that. So I don't know, I'm tempted to continue on because the next book is much shorter. I think it's only like 300 pages, so I could just kind of like blitz through that and see if that one's better and then continue on with the series, but I don't know. I feel like I should have read this ages ago. Maybe I would have liked it when I was younger, but I maybe have missed the mark for me. So yeah, only 2 stars for this one, which is really sad, and I don't give 2 stars out very often, but I just didn't enjoy it. Very sorry about this if this is your favourite series in the world, because I know it is for some people. The next book I read was actually kind of a surprise, especially after everything I've just said about that book. This is an urban fantasy that kind of talks about spiritual, clairvoyant kind of dimensions that is a little bit different. It's not quite clairvoyancy, but it's kind of extra spirits, like things coming from a different dimension into the world that are like evil, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Dion, and this I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's a YA fantasy, so it was super easy to read, and it's got lots of representation. We have, I believe, a non-binary character, we have lots of LGBTQ plus characters in here. It deals with a lot of topics on race, and it's just overall the magic system was really fun and cool, and it was just a great book, and the romance as well. There is romance in here if you like that. So this follows a girl called Bree, and she has just lost her mum a few months previous to this, so she's dealing with a lot of grief and kind of overcoming that. And she ends up going to this university on their kind of early acceptance program, so she's only 16 I believe when this takes place. But she goes with her friend who's also 16 to this early thing, and when they're at a party she kind of sees something that she's not sure she's meant to, and it's like to do with this like spirit that no one else seems to be able to see except these few people. And she discovers that actually there's this secret society that deals with these beasts that come to them through portals and tries to kill them all, so they have to kill them first basically. And the secret society is all based on Arthur, like Merlin and Arthur. So they're like all meant to be like descendants of Arthur, like the main people, and they end up getting their powers through a kind of, they become awakened, and they get the knight's power. So like the round table knights, they get their powers if the danger is big enough, and they become awakened. And there's like the descendant of King Arthur, there's the descendant of Gawain, there's the descendant of Lancelot, all that kind of stuff. And then they have squires who are like their like best buds, and they are to like protect them. So yes, it was just a really fun read, and the magic system was so interesting and like unique that I've never really heard of anything like that before. And I thought it was a really cool intake on how that magic would have like translated over into like contemporary times. I liked it a lot, and I would definitely recommend it if you haven't read it already. It's quite a short little nice read. It is a series I think, and it's a debut novel, and it was so well written for a debut novel. Like I think I've read quite a few debuts recently that just haven't had the same pizzazz as some other like authors. I'm being really horrible here. Obviously you expect growth. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just thought it was really well written. So I would highly recommend this if you haven't picked it up already, and if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. So the next book I have is one that is a continuation of a series that I started I believe last month or the month before, and that was the 5th season. This is the Obelisk Gate, and this one was a downgrade for me. I think it kind of developed a little bit in the series. It felt very much like a middle book. Not a lot happened. The first book I thought was really good, the 5th season. There was a lot of journeying. You were discovering the magic system as the plot developed, so there wasn't a lot of kind of info dumping that was really boring. Whereas this, all the kind of knowledge that you got was through someone telling someone else, and there just wasn't a lot happening because they were kind of forced, because of how everything had like manifested, they were forced to kind of stay stagnant in this one area, and I think that really held back the plot, and it just wasn't as interesting for me. So I did in fact read this, majority of this, in a 48-hour readathon, which I think was good. Although maybe if I'd read it spread out, I would have remembered so much of the previous, so it wouldn't have felt like it was so slow, because it just felt like nothing was happening. I don't know. But it did take me a long time to read the first 50 pages until that readathon, so maybe not. It didn't, like, her writing was still amazing. The atmosphere and the world building is really interesting. This is a world based on earthquakes that destroy the land and trigger like tsunamis and like different kind of natural disasters every few hundred years, and they kind of wipe out, or 1,000 years, and they wipe out civilization as they know it, and they have to kind of rebuild, which is very interesting. And it has like the magic people are to do with that, so they can trigger these earthquakes, but they can also kind of diffuse it around the area, but people don't like them. They think that they're dangerous, so they're hunted because of it, and that kind of thing. So I wish the plot had just been a little bit more interesting in this book. It definitely felt like it was setting up for the next book, which is why I am excited to continue on with the series, because I do think the next book will be really good. Just this wasn't yet. So I have faith in the continuation of the series. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I gave the first book 5 stars. So it was a little bit of a sliding down, but I don't mind. I think it will get better. Hopefully I'm going to read the next book next month, so you'll find out whether or not I am right then. So the next book is another one that wasn't, or the first book that wasn't actually on my TBR, and another one that I read within the 48-hour readathon, and that's because I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot that I'd ordered it. I ordered this like 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I ordered it in 2019, the end of 2019, because I think it was meant to come out in 2020, but then it got pushed back because of everything that was going on. So it ended up being delivered this year, or coming out this year, and I completely forgot I'd ordered it until I got a message from Waterstone saying that your order had been dispatched, and I was like, I haven't ordered anything. But it was this. It was the Gilded Ones by Mime Order, and I love this. Not only is the cover super cool, but the pages are super cool. And it was a really fun read. Like, it is another YA fantasy that has a very cool magic system and world. So this is based on a world where people go, or the girls, I think it's only the girls, go through this ceremony when they turn 16, I want to say, and they test their blood, and then if their blood comes out gold, they are seen as these demons, and they are basically slaughtered and murdered because they're these demons. And that's basically what happens to this girl, but they're kind of immortal. They only have one way in which they can die, so that could be beheading, it could be drowning, it could be suffocation, that kind of thing. But if it's not that thing, if they're killed by that thing, they will experience the death and then be reawakened. And so people try like multiple ways to kill these people, so it's quite horrible and gruesome and traumatic. But that's what happens to this girl when she's in this village, and she ends up being found by this woman who takes her, and she joins this military force that the king is putting together to defeat these other demon things, which are like these kind of, I imagine them being like, I don't actually know, that's what I imagine them looking like, but not like a human, like a actual creature. That's my imagination of them. So these creature things come and destroy villages, and they kill people, so they're really bad, and the kingdom wants to kill them all. So they put together this army of these Gilded Ones who are like super immortal, strong and fierce female warriors, and they are being put together to go and defeat and go into the home of these people, these creatures, and kill them all. However, it's not all as it seems. Things are being lied about, there is deception, there is uncertainty about the magic, so it's all about kind of finding out that. There is a little bit of a romance in there, and this is, I believe, at least a duology. There is another one coming out. Whether or not it's a series, I have not a clue. Obviously watch my 24-hour read plan if you want to see all my thoughts as I was reading it, but this did feel like it kind of wrapped up very nicely. In the end, I wanted kind of a bit of a more gruesome ending perhaps, or a bit more, I don't know, a bit of pizzazz at the ending. It kind of all came together really nicely, which is nice, but I wanted something more. Because I'm a horrible person basically, and I wanted blood and guts and gore. So I ended up giving this 4 stars because it was a really good book. I would really recommend this if you haven't picked this up yet, and it's got a super cool cover, so how can you lose? The next book I read was one that I also really enjoyed. Actually, I had a pretty good reading month this month. I think there's only the Mime Order I didn't like, so everything else was a 4-star or above, apart from the Bleed's Kiss, but I have faith, as I said. But this was another 4-star read, and this is the Assassins Apprentice by Robin Hobb. It is the first book in her Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in a whole load of trilogies that take place in this world. This follows a boy called Fitz, who is the bastard child of the next in line to the throne of the kingdom, and he's been raised until he was like 6 years old by his mum and his grandfather, but his grandfather decides that he doesn't want to pay for him anymore, so he kind of dumps him on the doorstep of his uncle's house or palace or big building. He is taken in by them, but he is obviously a bastard child, so they don't kind of recognise him as the throne, so he's kind of given to the stable manager, the guy who runs the stables, to be raised. But then the king kind of sees him as a good middle ground person where he has connections to the throne, but he's not got the same kind of restrictions as a prince would. He can go places a prince can't go, he can like befriend people that they wouldn't, like the kind of servants, that kind of thing. And so he's the prime person, he believes, to become an assassin. So he ends up being trained to be an assassin, and there is a lot of political maneuvering, disguise, kind of unknown objectives, secrecy going on in this. There is a lot of like courtroom politic kind of idea, but not in a courtroom really, like underhand, behind the scenes. And there's just, it's a very slow book. So if you're not a fan of slow books, then maybe it's not for you. There's like, the tension is not brought through big fight scenes, that kind of thing. It's brought through the unknown, so the mysteriousness around the magic system, because we don't really know how that works. We learn more about it throughout like kind of like halfway point, but even then it's kind of unknown. Fitz himself has a kind of different magic than everyone else as well. The magic is very exclusive, like it's only taught to very elitist kind of people, and even then it's kind of, you don't really know how it works. And also obviously you don't know what people are thinking, the politics and that kind of thing, so a lot of the tension is brought through the mystery elements that you are not told. You're kind of hinted at there might be something there, but you're not told what it is, and reading it you kind of want to discover to learn it. So this is a beautifully slow paced book. It is incredible. Like, it is less than 400 pages, but when you finish it you have got so much world building done, so much character development. You really feel like you've read such a rich fantasy that you're kind of just like, was it's not 700 pages, because I know so much about this world, how can they fit it all in just 300 pages? And through such a slow paced book you'd think like it would have to be really fast paced to get all this knowledge in there, but it's not. It's just expertly done. The only reason it's not a 5-star is because it was so slow and the tension was building so slowly. I think it's gonna just continue to build up, and the next books in the series are just gonna get better, so I'm kind of waiting for that peak. It's on the rise. So yeah, this was a great book, and I really think that if you haven't given it a go, you should definitely pick it up, because I am excited to continue on with the series, that is for sure. So the 6th and final book in the month that I read was actually a reread for me, and one that I am so glad I did, and that is The Ember in the Ashes, or An Ember in the Ashes, not The Ember in the Ashes. So this follows 2 characters who live in this world that is kind of inspired by imperialistic Rome, and it also has a lot of Persian mythology in there. So we've got like Jin and Efrits, I think that's how you say them. Please correct me if I am wrong. We follow 2 characters, one who is the kind of training or just about to qualify as the Empire's elitist kind of soldiers. They are top-notch evil killing machines, basically. That's what they're trained to be. And they're called masks because they are given this mask out of this metal that molds their face so they can't take it off. And then we also follow this girl called, I think I say it differently every single time, but I think it's Leia. I've never seen it spelled like that, but it's L-A-I-A. I was like, Leia? I'm gonna go with Leia. And the other boy's called Elias, but Leia is the girl who has just, at the beginning of this book, it happens in the first like 2 chapters, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything really, but her whole family is basically murdered by these masks, and her brother is kidnapped, or not kidnapped, just taken by them and put in prison, and her goal for the book is to release him and get him back and save him, break him out of the prison basically. So she ends up going undercover in the kind of elite school and has to find out all this information for the resistance people so that they'll break out her brother. And yes, there's also games going on because the new emperor even is being elected, and Elias is one of the potential candidates, but he also doesn't want to be the part of these masks. He doesn't agree with their morals or their actions or anything like that, so he doesn't want to be them. So there's a lot of tension going on, there's romance going on there, but like done in a very nice way, and there is just, it's just such a good book. I was really worried that I wasn't going to like this because this was a reread, and I don't tend to like books as much as a reread, and it's also been like 4 years I think since I read this. My reading tastes have changed a lot since then, and I was just worried that it wasn't going to be as good as I thought it was, and it did have that nostalgic feeling, so it did also add to my kind of reading experience. But I do generally think that if you're interested in YA fantasy, this is still a series that is still going to be enjoyable for you. It is still going to be a really good series. It's quite fast paced but not overtly so. The world is very well built up and developed in a way that's not info dumpy at all. It just feels like this is the world and this is the world you're reading, and you still have every information that you need. And I can't wait to continue on with the series. I haven't read the final book in the series, that's the only one I haven't read, so I'm very excited to see how the finale goes, and it's just gonna be good. It's gonna be good. I'm excited. So those are all the books I read in March. Don't forget to comment down below and let me know what your favourite book of March, what books you would recommend, or whether or not it was a good reading week, month even for you. Thank you again for watching. If you would like to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I post weekly reading vlogs every Tuesday and then a kind of sit down chatty video every Friday, and that would be incredible. So I hope you had a good day, or have a good day, depending on when you're watching this, and I will see you in the next video very soon.